In the edge of the galaxy, in a war-ravaged world, humanity was considered weak. Among the stars, many powerful alien races dominated. The humans were often underestimated, but in the darkest corners of the galaxy, they had their own secret strength. In one such corner, on a forgotten planet, lived an alien girl named Tyla. She was from a species known for their gentle nature, not built for combat. Her people, the Arwen, were often mocked by other races for their fragility and lack of fighting ability. Tyla was no exception. She was small, quiet, and looked down upon even by her own kind. Her people whispered about her weakness, calling her a failure, but Tyla didn't mind. She had no desire to fight. She only wanted peace, but it seemed like that was impossible in this galaxy. Her world was constantly under attack by the brutal Zoreth, a ruthless alien species that thrived on war and destruction. The Zoreth were warriors, fierce and strong, their eyes filled with the desire to conquer. For years, the Arwen were forced to live in fear of their attacks. But it wasn't just the Zoreth who made life hard for Tyla. It was her own people. They would mock her for her inability to stand up for herself, calling her weak and useless. Every day felt like a reminder that she didn't belong. But one day, everything changed. Captain Zachary Riker, a human soldier who had been stranded on the planet after a failed mission, stumbled into Tyla's world. His ship had crashed in the wildlands, and he was lost, injured, and alone. Despite being human, and thus viewed with disdain by most of the alien species, he was a soldier, trained in survival and combat. He had a reputation for being tough and capable, but he had long lost hope of ever returning to his home. Zachary's arrival did not go unnoticed. The Arwen didn't trust humans, and neither did the other alien races. They saw him as just another warrior, someone who had no place in their world. But Tyla saw something different in him. She noticed how he moved, how he didn't give up, even when everything was against him. Zachary was broken, but he still fought for survival. She saw strength in his struggle, and she wanted to learn from him. Despite the cold stares from her people, Tyla approached Zachary, offering him help. At first, he was wary. He had heard the rumors of the Arwen's weakness. But when he saw the sincerity in her eyes, he realized that she wasn't like the others. She wasn't just weak. She had something more, something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. "Teach me," Tyla said, her voice soft but filled with determination. "I want to learn." Zachary stared at her for a long moment, unsure. She was fragile, yes, but something in her made him believe that perhaps, just maybe, she could rise above the limits of her people. He agreed. And so began the transformation of Tyla, the outcast. Little did she know, this simple request would change the course of her life, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy, forever. Zachary Riker stood at the edge of the training field, watching Tyla closely. She was small, almost fragile compared to the others, yet there was a quiet determination in her eyes. The galaxy had taught him many things, but never had he seen someone like Tyla. Her species was known for its peaceful ways, yet here she was, eager to learn how to fight. "Are you sure about this?" Zachary asked, his voice rough with doubt. Tyla nodded. "I'm sure. I want to learn. I have to." Zachary sighed and took a step forward. The decision to train her had been an unexpected one. He wasn't a teacher. He had always fought alone, relying on his own strength to survive. But there was something about Tyla, her quiet strength, her refusal to give up, that made him want to help her. Maybe, just maybe, she had the potential to become something more than what everyone thought. "All right," Zachary said, pulling out a wooden training stick. "We start simple. A weapon is only as good as the person using it. First, we'll focus on your stance." He demonstrated the proper stance, holding the stick in a way that balanced strength and control. Tyla watched carefully, her eyes following every movement. Then she mimicked him, though her grip was shaky at first, and her posture wasn't perfect. "You're too stiff," Zachary said. "Relax. The weapon shouldn't feel like a burden." It should feel like an extension of yourself. Tyla tried again, this time focusing on her breathing, letting go of the tension in her body. Slowly, her grip grew steadier, and her posture became more fluid. Zachary nodded in approval. "Better," he said. "Now let's practice some basic strikes. You need to move quickly and decisively. Hesitation will get you killed." Over the next few weeks, the training grew tougher. Every day, Zachary pushed her harder. He would take her through intense drills, testing her agility, reflexes, and strength. She wasn't the fastest, but she was relentless. Every time she fell, she would get back up. Every time she made a mistake, she learned from it. Zachary could see it, the spark of something deeper inside her, something that could make her great. "Good," he said after one particularly tough session. "You're improving faster than I expected." But there was a problem. Tyla's species, the Arwen, were not built for war. Her body wasn't strong like the Zoreth warriors or the Retheri, who towered over her. At times, Zachary would see the exhaustion in her eyes, the strain on her muscles. But she didn't stop. She kept going, even when her body screamed at her to quit. Zachary could see it now, the difference between the weak girl who had been mocked by her people and the warrior who was emerging. It wasn't just about strength. It was about willpower. It was about her heart. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session, Tyla collapsed on the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. Zachary knelt beside her, offering her a water bottle. She took it, drinking deeply. "You're doing great," he said, "but you need to pace yourself. You won't win a fight if you burn out too quickly." Tyla wiped her brow and looked up at him, her eyes full of determination. "I won't stop. I can't stop. I need to prove that I'm not weak." Zachary smiled, feeling a sense of pride for the girl who had once been an outcast. "I believe in you, Tyla. Don't ever forget that." As the days turned into weeks, Tyla's transformation was undeniable. She wasn't just learning to fight. She was learning to survive, to lead, and to believe in herself. Zachary had given her the tools, but it was her own strength that would carry her forward. And soon, she would face challenges that would test every lesson she had learned. But for now, one thing was clear. The girl who had once been mocked was no longer the same. She was becoming something more, something unstoppable. Tyla had come a long way since her first day of training with Zachary. What had once seemed impossible, transforming from a frail, mocked girl to a warrior, was now a reality. Her body had grown stronger, her reflexes faster, and her confidence unshakable. But with her rising strength, the galaxy around her was starting to take notice. In the galactic capital, on a world far from the one where Tyla trained, the Zoreth were already preparing their next move. The Zoreth were a brutal, warrior race, feared across the stars. They respected nothing but power, and they saw Tyla's rise as a challenge to their authority. Kor, the leader of the Zoreth, was particularly angered by the idea that someone like Tyla, small, fragile, and from a peaceful species, could ever hope to be a threat to him. He had heard the rumors of her training, of her growing strength, and he scoffed at the idea of a weakling challenging his empire. "We will deal with her," Kor growled, his dark eyes glowing with contempt. "The human fool may have trained her, but she is still an insect beneath our boot." But Kor underestimated Tyla. He had no idea what she had become under Zachary's guidance. Back on the frontier planet, Zachary could feel the change. There was a tension in the air, something he couldn't quite place. The peaceful life they had tried to build, hidden away from the galaxy's wars, was starting to fray. The news of Tyla's growing abilities had spread like wildfire, and it wasn't just the Zoreth who were taking notice. The Arwen, her own people, who had once mocked her, were now beginning to feel uneasy. They feared what would happen if Tyla truly became a warrior. After all, a warrior could bring war, and the Arwen were not ready for that. Some began to rally against her, whispering behind her back, calling her a traitor to their peaceful ways. Others feared that her rise would bring the wrath of the galaxy's fiercest empires upon them. Tyla had become a symbol, but not everyone saw it as a symbol of hope. Some saw it as a threat. One afternoon, as Zachary and Tyla practiced in the training fields, an unfamiliar ship appeared in the sky. It was sleek, dark, and ominous. The Zorath were here. Tyla's heart raced as she looked up at the ship, knowing that this moment was inevitable. The Zorath had come for her, just as she had known they would. The galaxy's most feared warriors were on their way, and they would not stop until they had crushed her. Zachary turned to her, his eyes serious. "Stay calm. You've trained for this. Remember everything I taught you." Tyla nodded, swallowing her fear. She had come so far, but this was different. This wasn't just training anymore. This was real. The stakes were higher, and failure was not an option. "Let's do this," she said, her voice steady, though inside she felt the weight of the moment. The Zorath ship landed, and the ground shook as its massive form touched down. Kor stepped out first, his towering figure casting a shadow over the field. His eyes locked onto Tyla, and for a moment he just stared at her, as if trying to understand how someone like her could challenge his might. "You are a fool to think you can stand against us," Kor sneered. "I will crush you, and your human friend will watch as you fall." Tyla didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid. She had been preparing for this day. And now, it was time to show the galaxy what she had become. The ground trembled beneath Tyla's feet as the Zorath ship landed with a thunderous roar. The towering black vessel was like a symbol of war itself, dark and menacing. Zachary stood beside Tyla, his eyes hard as steel. They had trained for this moment, but he knew nothing could truly prepare her for what was about to happen. Kor, the Zorath leader, stepped off the ship with a slow, deliberate movement. He was a giant of a being, covered in thick, armored plating that gleamed in the sunlight. His eyes, red like fire, fixed on Tyla with disdain. The other Zorath warriors filed out behind him, their eyes scanning the surroundings, looking for a fight. "Get ready," Zachary whispered to Tyla, his voice low and serious. Tyla nodded. Her heart raced, but she felt a strange calmness inside her. The last few months of grueling training with Zachary had pushed her to her limits. She was no longer the girl who had been mocked by her people. She was a warrior now, and this was her moment to prove it. Kor's voice boomed, cutting through the tense air. "You think you can challenge the might of the Zorath? You, a weakling from a peaceful race. You are nothing." Tyla didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had been called weak her entire life. But now, she had the power to show everyone that they were wrong. Without warning, Kor charged toward her, his massive body moving like a force of nature. He swung a heavy, spiked mace toward her, a weapon that could crush a planet's surface with a single blow. Tyla's eyes locked onto the weapon, studying its movement with the focus she had learned from Zachary. "Move," Zachary shouted. Tyla sprang into action, her body reacting before her mind could fully catch up. She dodged to the side, feeling the wind from Kor's mace as it whooshed past her. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't hesitate. She had trained for this. She had been taught to anticipate every move, every strike. Kor growled in frustration. "You're fast, but speed won't save you." He swung again, this time with even more power. But Tyla was ready. She ducked under the swing, rolling across the ground and coming up behind him. With a quick, practiced motion, she drew the training blade Zachary had given her, a lightweight sword designed for speed rather than brute strength. She aimed for the joint in Kor's armor, the one place he was vulnerable. Her strike was swift and precise, but the Zorath leader's armor was tough. The blade glanced off, leaving only a small scratch. Kor turned, enraged, and swung again. But Tyla was already moving, her body flowing like water as she evaded his attacks. Each movement felt like it was in perfect rhythm with the fight, as though she had become one with the battle itself. Zachary watched with pride. Tyla wasn't just surviving. She was adapting, thinking, and fighting with the heart of a true warrior. Kor, growing more frustrated, took a deep breath. He was stronger, yes, but Tila had something he didn't: speed, agility, and the will to never give up. The fight raged on, with Tila using everything she had learned to outmaneuver Kor. She wasn't going to win by force alone. She was going to win with strategy, with intelligence, and she wasn't about to let Kor's taunts break her. This was only the beginning. The first test had begun, and Tila was determined to show the Zorath and the galaxy that she was no longer the girl who had been mocked. She was a warrior, and she was ready to fight for her place in the stars. The fight between Tila and Kor had been raging for what felt like hours. Sweat soaked her clothes, and her muscles burned with exhaustion, but she refused to stop. Every strike from Kor was like a force of nature, his massive mace swinging with deadly force. Yet Tila had learned to move with purpose, using her agility to stay one step ahead. Kor's attacks were relentless, but they were also predictable. The Zorath leader was powerful, but he lacked the finesse that Tila had gained in her training. Every time he swung his weapon, Tila was there, dodging, blocking, or countering. Her mind raced with calculations, thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. Zachary watched from the sidelines, his eyes never leaving Tila. He had trained her well, but this was something else. This wasn't just about physical strength. This was about heart, determination, and the ability to rise above the expectations that others had set for her. Tila's strike missed again as Kor spun his mace in a wide arc. She slid to the ground, narrowly avoiding the blow that would have crushed her. Her breath came in sharp gasps, and her vision blurred from exhaustion. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. "You're quick," Kor sneered, "but you can't avoid me forever. Eventually, you will make a mistake." Tila's heart pounded in her chest. She was starting to feel the weight of the fight. Her body was tired. Her mind was foggy, but she pushed through. This was the moment she had been preparing for. This was her test. She couldn't afford to fail now. "Keep moving, Tila," Zachary shouted, his voice cutting through the air. "Don't let him control the fight." The sound of Zachary's voice seemed to ignite something inside her. It was like a spark that lit her determination. She couldn't let Kor win. She couldn't let herself fail. Not when she had come so far. Tila tightened her grip on the training blade, her eyes narrowing as she focused on Kor. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when he would make a mistake. And now she saw it. Kor had overextended himself with one of his wild swings, leaving himself open for just a split second. Without thinking, Tila surged forward, closing the gap between them in a flash. She ducked under Kor's mace and struck with all the force she could muster, her blade slashing across the exposed joint in his armor. The Zorath leader howled in pain as the blade cut through the armor, leaving a deep gash. Kor staggered back, his grip on the mace faltering. For the first time, Tila saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to land a blow. But Tila didn't stop. She pressed the attack, her strikes fast and precise. Kor tried to recover, but the momentum had shifted. The arrogance that had once fueled him was now replaced with frustration. How is this possible?" Kor growled, trying to regain his composure. "You are nothing. You cannot defeat me." Tila didn't respond. She didn't need to. She could see it now. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been looked down upon, for everyone who had been told they couldn't. This was more than a battle. It was a statement. With one final powerful strike, Tila knocked Kor's mace from his hands, sending it crashing to the ground. He stumbled, his massive form falling to one knee as he struggled to regain his balance. Tila stood over him, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her gaze unwavering. She wasn't done yet. Not until Kor realized that she was no longer the weak outcast girl. She was a warrior. And this battle was hers to win. The ground was quiet after the battle. Kor, the mighty Zorath leader, lay on the ground, defeated and humiliated. His massive body was sprawled out, his armor battered, and his eyes filled with disbelief. Tila stood over him, her blade still in her hand, but her body sagged with exhaustion. She had won, but at what cost? The fight had taken everything from her. Her muscles screamed in pain, and every breath felt like a struggle. She had given everything she had to defeat Kor, but now, as she looked down at him, she couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come too easily. Kor had underestimated her, and now he was paying the price. Zachary approached from behind, his footsteps heavy on the ground. He had watched the fight with pride, but even he knew that Tila had pushed herself to the limit. She had done more than just survive. She had defeated an enemy who was far stronger than she was. But now, there was a silence that felt heavy in the air. "You did it," Zachary said, his voice low. "You beat him." Tila didn't respond at first. She was too tired, too focused on the aftermath of the battle. Her mind was still racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had faced the Zorith leader head-on and emerged victorious, but it felt like something was missing. "Why do I feel like this isn't over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zachary looked down at Kor, who was struggling to rise to his feet. "Because it's not. This was just the beginning." Tila's eyes narrowed as she watched Kor, his pride now shattered. The Zorith leader growled in frustration, his hand reaching for a small communicator on his belt. "I'll be back," Kor spat, his voice thick with anger. "You haven't seen the last of the Zorith." With that, he activated the communicator, summoning reinforcements from his ship. Tila felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This was far from over. Kor was only one part of the Zorith war machine, and he wouldn't stop until he had crushed her and everyone else in his way. "We need to move," Zachary said, his tone urgent. "If we stay here, they'll overwhelm us." Tila nodded, her mind already shifting into survival mode. The fight had only just begun. The Zorith would not let their defeat go unpunished, and now they would come at her with everything they had. But she couldn't back down. She couldn't let fear control her. "We fight," she said, her voice steady. "We fight until the end." Zachary didn't hesitate. He had seen this resolve in her before, but it was different now. Tila wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something much bigger. She was fighting for her people, for the future of the galaxy. As they moved quickly toward the edge of the battlefield, preparing to retreat and regroup, Tila couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had changed her. She was no longer just a girl who had been mocked by her people. She was a warrior, and she had just proven to herself and to the galaxy that she was more than capable of standing against the most dangerous forces in the universe. But as she looked at the dark sky above, she knew that the road ahead would be long and hard. The Zorith wouldn't stop coming, and neither would she. The days following Kor's defeat were filled with a tense calm. Tila and Zachary had left the battlefield behind, retreating into the dense forests on the outskirts of the planet. The silence around them was only broken by the occasional sound of distant winds, the rustling of trees, and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the ground. Tila knew the calm wouldn't last. Kor's threat still hung over them like a storm cloud. The Zorith leader had called for reinforcements, and the galaxy's most ruthless warriors were already on their way. She had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. "We need to prepare," Zachary said, his voice cutting through the silence. He had been scanning the horizon, his eyes constantly on the lookout for danger. "They'll come for us, and when they do, we have to be ready." Tila nodded. She knew what Zachary was saying was true. They couldn't afford to waste any time. The Zorith would not forget their defeat. The galaxy was filled with enemies, some of whom would do anything to see her fail. But she wasn't going to let that happen. Not now. "How do we prepare?" Tila asked, her voice steady but laced with a hint of uncertainty. "We train," Zachary replied simply. "More than ever. You've come a long way, Tila, but we need to push harder. The Zorith are relentless, and they won't stop until you're dead." Tila's jaw tightened. She didn't like the thought of running or hiding. She wasn't the same person who had been mocked by her people. She had proven that she could fight, that she could win. And now she had to make sure she could do it again. And again, until the Zoreth were nothing more than a memory. Zachary turned to face her. You're stronger now, but strength isn't everything. You need to be smarter, faster, and more adaptable. The Zoreth won't fight fair, and neither will the other enemies who will come after you. You need to think ahead. Anticipate their moves. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be. Tyla stood tall, the weight of his words sinking in. She had learned to fight, but now she needed to learn how to outthink her enemies. Every battle wasn't just about power, it was about survival. I'll do whatever it takes, she said firmly. For the next few days, Zachary pushed Tyla harder than ever. They practiced in the dense forests, using the terrain to their advantage. Tyla learned to use her environment, hiding, setting traps, and using the landscape to gain the upper hand. Zachary taught her new techniques, blending both hand-to-hand combat and the use of weapons. Each day, she grew stronger, faster, and more confident. But the pressure was building. The longer they stayed in hiding, the more the fear of being found grew. Tyla knew that time was running out. The Zoreth would be coming, and she had to be ready for whatever they threw at her. One night, as they sat by the campfire, Zachary spoke again. You've come a long way, Tyla, but you need to remember something important. This fight isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone who believes in you. Your people, your allies. They're counting on you. Tyla looked at the fire, the flickering flames dancing in her eyes. I won't let them down. Zachary smiled. I know you won't. As the night sky stretched above them, Tyla felt the weight of the journey ahead. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of her people and for the hope of a galaxy that had underestimated her. The war was coming, and she would face it with everything she had. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Days had passed since Tyla and Zachary had gone into hiding, and every day felt like it was drawing them closer to the inevitable. The Zoreth were coming, and with them, an army that would not stop until they had crushed everything in their path. Tyla had trained relentlessly, pushing her body to its limits. She had learned new techniques, adapted to her surroundings, and sharpened her skills with every passing day. But despite her growth, there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She wasn't ready for what was coming. Not yet. The days blurred together as Zachary kept her focused. Every morning they would run drills, and every evening they would review their progress. The forest had become their battlefield, and every tree, every rock, every patch of earth was a potential ally or enemy. Tyla's mind was always moving, always thinking ahead, but it was exhausting. There was no time to relax, no time to breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tyla and Zachary sat by the fire, the flames casting long shadows around them. The crackling of the fire was the only sound, a quiet contrast to the storm that raged in Tyla's chest. Zachary, Tyla began, her voice quiet. Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? All this training, all this fighting. What if we lose? Zachary looked at her, his face unreadable for a moment. He had always been the one to push her, to keep her focused. But in that moment, he saw the doubt in her eyes, the same doubt that had once held her back. We can't afford to lose, he said softly, his voice steady. If we do, everything we've fought for, everything we've built, will be destroyed. And I know you don't want that. I know you're stronger than this, Tyla. You've already proven it. Tyla looked into the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. She knew he was right. They couldn't afford to lose. But the fear was still there, buried deep inside her. The weight of the upcoming battle was becoming almost too much to bear. As if on cue, a distant sound broke the silence, a low hum in the air. Tyla's heart skipped a beat as she turned to Zachary. Do you hear that? Zachary was already on his feet, his hand reaching for his weapon. Get ready. They're here. The sound grew louder, and soon, The sky above them was filled with the shadows of ships. Massive Zorath warships descending through the clouds. The storm was no longer just a feeling in Tyla's chest. It was real. The Zorath had arrived, and they were here to finish what Kor had started. Tyla's breath caught in her throat as she saw the ships. Her heart raced, but this time, there was no hesitation. She wasn't the scared girl who had fled from the battlefield before. She was a warrior now. And this was the moment she had been preparing for. "We fight," she said, her voice steady and filled with resolve. Zachary nodded, a proud look in his eyes. "We fight." As the Zorath warships loomed overhead, Tyla and Zachary knew this was the beginning of something far bigger than they could have imagined. The galaxy was about to change, and Tyla was going to be at the center of it. She had trained for this, bled for this, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. The ground shook as the Zorath warships landed, their massive forms casting shadows over the forest. The sky darkened, as though the very air was thick with the weight of the approaching storm. Tyla stood with Zachary beside her heart pounding, her breath steady, but her mind racing. This was the moment they had prepared for. The battle was about to begin. The Zorath soldiers poured out of their ships, towering figures in heavy, dark armor. Their eyes glowed with malice, and their weapons gleamed in the dim light. Tyla felt a cold wave of fear wash over her, but she forced it down. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. "We've got this," Zachary said, his voice low and firm, but his eyes never leaving the enemy. "Stay focused." Tyla nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. She had been in battles before, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything. For her people, for the galaxy, and for her future. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been looked down upon, everyone who had been told they couldn't. The first Zorath warrior charged forward, his battle cry echoing through the air. Tyla reacted without thinking, her body moving into a fluid stance as she met his charge head-on. Their blades clashed with a deafening sound, the force of the blow rattling her bones. The Zorath soldier was strong, but Tyla was faster. With a quick spin, she ducked under his swing and struck at the opening in his armor. The soldier staggered back, blood pouring from the wound. Tyla didn't pause. She was already moving, her blade flashing as she fought her way through the enemy ranks. Every move she made was calculated, every strike precise. She was a warrior now, and the battlefield was her home. Zachary fought beside her, his skill unmatched as he cut through the Zorath with ease. The two of them were a deadly combination, moving in perfect synchronization. But even with their skill, the odds were overwhelming. The Zorath soldiers just kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "Keep pushing," Zachary shouted as he sliced through another enemy. "We can't let them break through." Tyla nodded, her eyes scanning the battlefield. She could see the chaos unfolding around her. The Zorath were relentless, but Tyla wasn't backing down. She had come too far to lose now. But even as she fought, she could feel the toll it was taking on her. Her body was beginning to ache, her movements slowing. The Zorath weren't stopping. They were everywhere, coming at her from all sides. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a flash of movement. A Zorath warrior, larger than the rest, was making his way toward her. He was armed with a massive sword, the blade glowing with an unnatural energy. This wasn't just another soldier. This was a leader. And Tyla knew, deep down, that this would be her true test. The warrior approached, his eyes locked on her. He raised his sword high, preparing to strike. Tyla didn't hesitate. She charged forward, meeting him head-on. This would be the fight that determined everything. As their blades clashed, Tyla could feel the full weight of her training. Every lesson, every battle, every hardship had led to this moment. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for victory. And this time, she wouldn't stop until the Zorath were defeated.